Please welcome Suzanne. Hi, good evening.
This must be the fastest 2 minutes in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It's always good to check if everybody is ready. So that's, but yeah, we were. So we were. Yeah, yeah. Shortest break ever, probably. Yeah, yeah. Good to have you. Great to have you. I think
Yeah.
we already did quite some things together for the community, but this is the first time that we have you as a speaker at our event, at our Azure Thursday event.
Yeah, finally. It took a little while, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you never volunteered before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. That's the organizer life, right? Like you're always running and always trying to figure out what to do next and show up everywhere. And
always busy with organizing and doing stuff. And then, but hey, you were here. Great to have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw you started a few months ago a new opportunity at a really nice organization. Did you already have some chance to meet someone in real life, or is it all?
No, not at all. And this is so weird. So I joined Spotify a few months back, and when I joined Spotify, I was working from home and like fully remote. And I met some people on my team at my previous employer. Then I switched jobs, but actually I was still in the same room and still not meeting anyone. So that is like one of the most weird experiences I had in my professional career over the past years. It is so unreal to be in this room. And to literally I changed some things around.
The room is the same, but you have completely other.
It's still the same room, so it feels a little bit different. And I'm doing all kinds of exciting stuff. I will tell more about that later. But and that's like super cool. But it's still 2020, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, you will give us an introduction into Backstage. I need to admit, I don't know. I've never heard of it before, so I'm really.
Let's change that. Let's change that.
Yeah. So
come on. Yeah.
I would say just take it away and have fun.
And still, you invited me, so
of course.
So next time I will make up a service and see. No, let's not push it. Let me gently share my screen. There you go. This should be all right, right? I see my screen. Good. So, it's always a joy presenting virtually. Always juggling screens and that sort of stuff. But this all looks good. So, hi, folks. I'm really happy to finally be speaking at Azure Thursday. So that is really cool. I'm Suzanne Daniels. I work in developer relations at Spotify. And I do not work for the music service. I work for an open source developer platform. So tonight, I will cover how we came to build the developer portal and how it's now at the core of the developer experience at Spotify and how we came to open source it. And we'll have a brief peek behind the curtain. And maybe it's a bit odd, like a music company launching a best-in-class developer portal. Yes, we did that. A lot has been written about the engineering culture at Spotify, how we are organized, how we work in an agile way on whatnot, how we have this autonomous engineering culture. And we have always believed in the advantages coming from that autonomous culture. But there's also challenges. There's also a downside. And that brings me to the story where we came from and how we ended up here. So a bit over a decade ago, the whole engineering team could basically fit in a big car. And Spotify was basically built on top of monoliths, which lived on servers. And those servers had names, and people like to hug their servers or give them names and that sort of stuff. And the way it was managed basically could be done with spreadsheets. And actually, that was the case. And there was some tooling introduced to manage the spreadsheets or the data, getting in the data, getting out the data, making sure everything the people needed in the data center was in order so they could do their work properly and automate stuff. But over the years, this team grew, and it grew to the size of this small village. And there was also a move to microservices. The infrastructure grew, everything was more complex. So if this happens, and if you grow, it becomes difficult to keep track on who owns which microservice, who's running on call for something. Where can I find information? So a solution was created, and like many good stories start, there was a tool introduced. And that tool that was called ServiceDB, and that had a database, and people could go search for services and find some information about it. And that solved it a little bit. But the growth continued. And the infrastructure became more and more complex because of new technologies. Technologies became more complex, evolved faster. Finding stuff was really hard, especially when you did not have the knowledge, the tribal knowledge, to find that information. So if you were new and onboarding at a company, at Spotify at that time, it was hard to get on board. It was hard to find information. It was hard to move outside of your specific domain. So let's skip to the year 2016. Back and forth. But the year 2016, and Spotify accelerated in hypergrowth. But the onboarding became more and more confusing to a point where it was hyper confusing, right? The internal fragmentation, it slowed the teams down, but everybody wanted to get more speed. Adding more engineers to your teams, at some point, it just not improves your velocity at all. It actually slows you down. And with all the technologies exploding, multiple platforms, versions of frameworks, everything together used by different teams which grow exponentially, that's pure chaos. Now, one of the ways we measured our onboarding of developers was to look at the number of days it would take an engineer to get to the 10th pull request. And at some point, that went up to 60 days to get to your 10th pull request. So we knew we needed to solve this. So we had this team, and that team created a portal, a developer portal. And it was called System Z, and that was one place where people could find stuff. Who owns the service? Who's running on call? If you would log in, you would immediately see what you, and by you, I mean your team, own. You could immediately discover and search stuff. That was a great success. There is, however, one thing we learned, a little fault in here. And if you paid attention, you heard me say there was one team who created this portal. And that was a problem because everybody loved the portal and they wanted to get going with it. But can you imagine one team being responsible for all the feature requests and issues for that one portal. So just imagine their backlog. And the system was not made for extensibility. It was hard for people to contribute. So yeah, that needed to be solved as well. So we needed to fix that again. We reworked this system Z, and it got a plugin framework. And with this plugin framework, teams with specific domain knowledge could create plugins. In an isolated way, they could create their plugin and they could put it on top of Backstage. And they were able to actually tackle their problems to get their stuff in. Because if you are not able to do that, then you will eventually have fragmentation, because if you can't solve it in the tool, you will go outside of the tool. You will find your own solutions, because those are all autonomous teams. They all want speed. They all want their problem solved. So this was a better approach, which made much more sense and resonated really good within our developer community. Now, that was not the only thing. Also, the catalog was extended to host more types, like websites or data pipelines. And it got a rebranding, and we renamed it to Backstage, which is conveniently also the name for the open source project. So this is what we have nowadays. We have this developer portal, and everything you need is in there and is searchable. You can manage your services, you can explore your services, and you can create your service only from this one portal. And no, this portal doesn't solve everything. It doesn't do a lot. It aggregates the information and it makes sure that it is visible in one interface, instead of going to 13 portals to do one mundane task or learn specific CLI commands for each tool, or each tool in each domain, because everybody has this little other way of implementing stuff. And this new approach really hit the note. And over 80% of the contributions to Backstage come outside of the core team. Over 150 plugins have been contributed, and eventually the number of days to get to that 10th PR, not overnight, but it eventually went down to 20. But that doesn't really say much about happiness. And to measure that, if people are satisfied, we have this internal engineering survey where each and every tool gets rated by engineering people. And they can rate the services, and Backstage scores 86%. And that is really, really good. And we're really happy with that. And it shows that this approach really was a success. So a lot of companies asked us, hey, what is that thing that you use there? Can we maybe get our hands on that? And in March 2020, during our Hack Week, we actually open sourced it. And that's not the only reason to open source it. It's also because Backstage is at the core of our engineering experience. And to keep it successful and to ensure a good future for Backstage, open sourcing really was the way to go. We get a better product, collaborating with other people, with other perspectives, other businesses, other skill sets. That's the way forward for this product. So since open sourcing it, a lot has happened. One of the things is that it's actually donated to the CNCF. It's now a CNCF sandbox project, and that also had a great result. We have a really thriving community around Backstage, which is growing and growing. Last week we had contributor number 500 contributing, so That's really, really great news. We had a little party behind the scenes. But also the returning contributors are growing steadily. So more and more people who do their first time contribution, they do come back. And that's, of course, really important. And we have very, very fun and well-visited community meetups. Obviously, all digital. I'll share the link later. Yeah, and companies are adopting Backstage. We have over 70 adopters. There are some logos there. Yeah, these are the companies. And this is really important for such an open source project because companies betting on Backstage is good for Backstage. We are ensured that people are spending time to develop their plugins, to improve the product for themselves. Some contribute back to the community. It improves the product. And that's a great story, and that's how we like it. So Backstage is a platform. I know I've used developer portal and platform, but it is essentially a platform. And by that, I mean that in itself, Backstage does not solve a lot. The plugins are the power behind Backstage. So you extend Backstage, and by that, you make a developer portal. So just see it as the bottom plate of a Lego set. You know, you have to build on top of that yourself. And that is basically the success at Spotify. And it can also be the success at your company. It is more than an intranet for developers. I've read somebody like, well, developer portal, that's just a wiki. Well, no, it is also not a wiki. It is one front end for your entire infrastructure to integrate your tooling, like your CI/CD, your Kubernetes monitoring, security tools like sneak testing, your services, service catalog, applications, data, and your documentation for your components, like your APIs, but also other things like org charts or strategy documentation. And that you put on one place, regardless of how or where individual components are running or who manages them. So you have all these single sources of truth, and you have this one place where you aggregate them. Because, let's be honest, when you would be onboarding at this super hip and happening company as an engineer, and you come back the first day, you get the question, hey, how was your day? Well, my first day was really good. I have sent 8 Slack messages. I have found out that 3 of the teams actually renamed themselves to Marvel characters. And there's this person who's called Jim. Nobody knows in which team he is, but we do know he's there tomorrow. Okay, day 2. Awesome. I found this Jim person, and he sent me this Excel file. Yeah, I am now finding out what is the password to unlock it. It should be on the wiki somewhere. Day 3. Well, I was at the coffee machine. It begins with a yes. And I was complaining, and I got to talk to somebody, and that was a senior engineer called Irma, and she pointed me to this repository, and she said, yeah, well, I always clone this project to make sure that everything is according to the latest standards. Okay. But this also goes when you work longer somewhere for a longer period. Like, oh, I've opened 3 portals to have my skeleton app ready. I learned yet another cloud provider portal. Oh, let me take that back. This cloud provider, it's not really that consistent. So I have to learn every single service again. Oh, the docs for my microservice I'm no longer working on, that needs to be migrated to another doc system again. So these are all examples of frustrating experiences which create friction. And these are not the things we want to be working on. Probably if you are at work, you want to write code, or you want to implement something, or you want to look at some reporting or security stuff. You do not want to look at spreadsheets. You do not want an Excel file. You would want to maybe burn all the Excel files, but you would have to print them first, which is not a good idea. So Backstage lets you create new software using software templates. It will let you manage all the software you own in one centralized location. You are able to explore everything you need to get your job done. Libraries, maybe the dependencies, the infrastructure it relates to or depends on. But also, who do I need to call in the middle of the night if this service breaks down? So enough with the talking. Let's take a look at what it actually is. I'm going to try and open a browser. There you go. Okay, so I am this engineer, and I just got onboarded at this new company, which is called the Imaginary Goats Company, which happens to be the squad name I'm in. But yeah, I thought it was funny with the logo thingy here. Like, okay. Anyways, so I just got onboarded, and during my onboarding conversations, people pointed me like to this tool called Backstage, and they said, well, basically everything we have in this company, you can find it in that one place. Your onboarding document, how you will learn to use different technologies, how you can deploy stuff, how we do the documentation, what to find, where, what portals to look at. That's all also in this system. So during my onboarding, I already got a little bit used to the interface, and now I'm done. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try and deploy my first microservice. But first, let me just find out what this actually is, because that's basically the first thing I would want to discover is, okay, let's see what this company has. What kind of services do we have? If there is this service I would want to look into, I could, for instance, look at a certain team. Maybe DevRel, which happens to be the team I'm in. Certain lifecycle, I can filter this, I can filter specific types. And when I found what I need, I can click on that and can look at this service and look at the details. Now, this is like the homepage of my service. And here I can like see who owns it, what is the lifecycle. I can see who's running on call. Well, surprise, I just onboarded and I'm already on call for 3 years, according to PagerDuty, so I'm happy. Here's some the index.md, and the relationship which the service has. So this is a service my team manages. I do not know a lot of stuff about that, but I can here immediately see that this consumes the Spotify API. So I could discover that, or I can like look at the whole graph and maybe go wild with that and find out what I need to know and just clicking away what I don't need. But also I can look at what is the CI/CD status. How, well, this is not really good. Let me just rerun the workflow. These are all things I can do right from this portal, just by clicking on the service, and I can discover everything. Looking at the APIs, well, this is the API it consumes. Well, maybe I just want to look at the documentation for this API. I want to find out how I can get the albums. And here I can basically find all the documentation I need to get started here. But yeah, let's go back to the service. So I can also go to GitHub and I can see that there's this workshop I created at some point. And there's the documentation itself. Now this is obviously all Markdown, and it works like you would expect. And I can just go through the documentation. And this was also the way I onboarded when I joined Spotify. There were these golden paths. You're in engineering, you're an engineer. Here's the golden path for engineering for backend or front end, or maybe for a data engineer. So that's a way I onboarded, but also if there's a service and the service has documentation, I can find it also in this one place, which is really, really a good experience. Now, I've clicked a lot and I've read a lot, and I now understand what I need to do. I have seen how others have done it. I've seen that a lot of stuff is arranged under the hood for me. And I learned that I am able to create an application also from Backstage. And I told you earlier about, if you are at this company, and you want to get started and you want to get started real quick, we can gossip together. It's just between us. The fastest way could be that you would clone an existing project and you yank everything out you don't need and you build your application on top of that. Or maybe you have to find all kinds of stuff here and there and go through a few tutorials. Maybe you've automated a lot of stuff, but then you still need to add the documentation somewhere, register it in the system, maybe do some manual work or go to another portal again. So for this, Backstage has software templates, and that's the scaffolder service. And with the scaffolder service, you can deploy your template according to the standards your team, your company sets, and it will create everything for you. So it will create your skeleton application. It will register it in Backstage and whatnot. Even the documentation should be there. So let's try it. Let's say we are really confident and we name it Azure. I can't even type. There you go. So description, the owner, well, that's my team, because eventually we think that a team always owns something and not a single person. So I press next, I choose a location. Well, this company hosts everything on GitHub, and there should be a name for the repository and an owner. And there we go. I can review, is this the thing I would want to create? I press create, and now it fetches the skeleton, it populates it with the data from the form I just filled out. It will do everything I need, creating the skeleton app, making sure that there's documentation in there, that it lives up to the standard of my company. And, for instance, policies change. I don't even need to know about that because it would be in there. Well, it's done. Let's see if my newly created service is here. And yes, it is there. So now I'm confident that I have done the right thing. It is there. I can see that even the documentation is being generated. Probably it will say it's busy. Yeah. And as you can see, everything I need for my company is here. You might have been wondering, hey, how does that stuff actually get into Backstage? Well, I'm sorry, it's YAML. But as you can see, I didn't have to do any YAML because it was auto-generated by the template. So that's maybe the upside here. And this is also the way I can extend it. So this uses the Kubernetes object model. Let me click this. There you go. So for instance, if I would want to extend this, like the other service we looked at earlier with PagerDuty, then I would just add in the annotations PagerDuty, and I would add my key, which I will not do because I know you are all way too smart. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to point out as well is that where does the documentation come from? Well, obviously it sits with the source code because it should be a part of your process, and it's generated here. So how does it find that? Well, you can see that we use mkdocs, and here's the configuration for that. This is just an example, of course, but you can go well creative with that. Ah, look, there's the documentation. Good. So the other thing I would do is manage. And managing my stuff is looking at CI/CD of my newly created service. But there's like tons of plugins for Backstage. Actually, let's just take a look at that. There you go. So as you can see, there's various things available for you. And these are all NPM packages. So you can relatively easy, I should say, or streamlined, install them into your Backstage environment. If you're like, oh, well, I use Argo, well, please, Argo CD, here's the plugin. You can find some documentation on how to implement that. And this is the way you actually extend Backstage. Okay, that was a brief look at Backstage. Have I forgotten anything? No, I think not. Oh yeah, this is the tech radar, which is a way to see which services I should not yet and should use. So that's also one of the functionalities. There's also like a cost insights, so you can keep track of your cost management. That's also a really neat functionality. But I do not have a cloud provider configured just yet. So imagine what you could put in there. And it being all YAML, you could like link it to your cloud services maybe, like on which service does my microservice run on. So the possibilities are kind of endless and up to your imagination. So this is the interface. It is not your single point of truth. It is the single pane of glass. Autonomy is one of the most important things for Backstage. One team managing everything is really hard. With all the plugins, if you look at our core team, it is like about 6 people who manage Backstage. And the reason they can do that is because the teams with the domain knowledge, they create the plugins and they're responsible for the plugin. And that way, it is all decentralized. Just like our teams, it's autonomous. And the ownership, each component there is always has one owner, and that owner is responsible for that service. Responsible for the metadata in there, it is responsible for the production status, and usually this should be a team. So no, this is not the tool which will solve everything. But it is a great way to build up on your developer experience. So the software model has some core entities, like there may be a domain, There may be a system. The system may have the components and may leverage an API. There's, of course, users and there's groups. But each of these entities can also have a lot of different types. And that all is owned by somebody or is a member of something. So there's also a great level of detail you can bring in there for relationships. And to extend this, you use annotations. So like I show in my example with PagerDuty, that is an annotation I use for the PagerDuty plugin I installed. And that way, I can extend it. One of the other things is, like for GitHub, the GitHub slug, project slug, is also in there. This is an example of the catalog info.yaml. This lives with the source code. It uses the Kubernetes object model. It is extensible, but it's also optional. There are other ways to ingest information. You can, for instance, use a custom processor. The software templates, I've shown you how you can use them to deploy. This is the way you can ensure that the best practices are in there. That's a streamlined experience, and you can basically know what to expect. But it also registers it in the catalog. And well, one of the benefits is, of course, you do not have to write YAML. I cannot stress this enough. Now you might wonder, okay, this is all cool, but now I have these existing services because, well, this is really a happy flow. So let's take another look. If I can find my browser again. There you go. So if I go to create and I register an existing component, I have placed this, this YAML file inside my repo. And now I'm able to just edit. I can analyze it. It will look at the file. If it's okay, it will show the details of that. And I can import that. It will read it, and it will do basically the things to register this in my portal. The rest is not there yet. If you look at the YAML file itself, oh, that's good. Why? Ah, there you go. There you go. So this is the place where I then would start expanding that. Okay. Yep. Please be gone. There you go. So that was the thing about plugins. Yes. Good. I lost my browser there for a minute and my presentation, but it's all back now. So the other thing is it has this customizable, extensible plugin architecture. This is TypeScript, JavaScript in an NPM bundle with a Backstage prefix. You can also start creating a plugin from a skeleton plugin with yarn create plugin on the command line. And all core functionality basically is also just plugins. So everything I've shown you is basically also a plugin. So there's this core functionality making up Backstage, but everything I actually use as an engineer, those are all plugins. So this will address a lot of different challenges you might face. One of them is that we all will have a lot more new colleagues probably in the coming next years. So there's a lot of new onboarding. The ecosystem gets more and more chaotic. New versions coming out more rapidly. If you use a framework, new frameworks are coming out more rapidly. New versions of frameworks. It's becoming really complex. So, and the other thing is that it is open source. And that basically is also a really good thing, because you're able to leverage the power of a community looking at stuff, companies developing stuff in-house and open sourcing that. But you can also get in contact with other people. You can be a part of a thriving, fun community, if I might say that. Join our meetup at December 15, for instance. You can see for yourself. We have adopters sharing knowledge with each other. We also have from Spotify, you can schedule a call with us, and we have these conversations every day with companies who are interested in finding out how they can do the adoption, or where to get started with DX, or that sort of questions. So if you look at Backstage, a small team should manage it. The platform teams, they build, they maintain, they're the experts, right? So they own the plugins. And the feature teams, they use the plugins, and they build and they maintain their software. But more importantly, what you see is if you do that, you have this ownership and you have this feedback loop. So that really, really works well. So yeah, how do you deploy Backstage? Well, basically, you would just use what you normally use, the way you deploy everything else. So one way or another, it will fit in your infrastructure. It should follow the same deployment mechanisms as you have, because otherwise it would not make sense. And luckily, it is flexible to do that. So you're able to fit it in most places. Okay. That is a really great story, I think. But I have 20 bazillion thousand software components running in production. My docs are scattered around my organization. I have Confluence, I have Google Docs, who knows what else, Excel. And I'm onboarding new engineers daily. So where to start? And this question really makes sense, because as you can see, it could solve a lot of things. It doesn't mean you should. So focus on one problem you'd like to solve with Backstage, and maybe start with something which has a narrow use case. And then, adding small wins as you go, get to learn a product, get to know the community, learn how to navigate that, how to navigate the project itself, spread knowledge internally, have these hackathons where you maybe create a plugin together, and have these knowledge sharing sessions with each other. Show off what you have. Think of a great name. Make it a real product within your developer community. And that is most of the times the best way to build up this adoption of Backstage and get everybody enthusiastic to contribute to Backstage and to see the value there. So if you want to get started, there is some resources I will ask someone to paste these in the chat. Like I said, we have a great community. We have community sessions. The next one is December 15th. The link will also be in the chat there. We will have an adopter telling about their journey with Backstage. We'll have a little panel discussion around questions which the community asked, and that sort of things. We have the newsletter. There's a lot to explore, and a really lively Discord. So if you have any questions, there's always a way to ask them. And of course, I think my Twitter handle was on the screen earlier. Just find me, and I'll be happy to connect you to somebody who can answer your question, or answer it myself if I'm able to. Yeah, that is basically what I wanted to share about Backstage tonight. Are there any questions?
Great, thanks. Thank you very much. Yes, we have some questions. So, one question we have is: can you use other Git providers than GitHub?
Yes. Yeah. There's like a lot of extensions. So if you use GitLab or something, that's totally possible. There's like many different extensions. Also, if you look at CI/CD, there's also Jenkins, and there's tons of well, not tons, but there's a lot of plugins. I can tell you. Yeah, and yeah. I chose GitHub because that is basically what I was working on before the session, is on the getting started documentation, and I chose to go with GitHub. Don't ask why.
Yeah. No. Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, and yeah, I think it's pretty amazing product, and it's awesome potential. And where do you see Backstage in well, let's say the next 3 years, or where it's going to? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a fairly new category, like internal developer portals. I always believe that if you look at technology, technology itself is really cool. I can talk for hours about technology. Well, you know that. But I can talk for hours about technology. But technology is only really cool if people are able to use it and understand it, and if they can work without friction. And I think it's a good thing that there's more and more attention to having to giving developers a more frictionless experience. More and more companies have internal DX divisions, massively improving the developer experience. We have cloud providers talking about developer effectiveness. So there is a lot of attention for this. I see a lot of companies doing a lot of investment in this area. Yeah, and it's necessary, because I don't know about you, but it is so chaotic. It is so
agree. Like, yeah, it's a really hot topic. It's yeah, especially at the bigger companies. Then it's yeah, I think it's a must-have to have something like this. And yeah, I think it's like a CMDB, but then the next level.
Yeah. The fun thing is when I learned of Backstage first, I was thinking back of the moment when I was consultant for many years, and I have put together a developer portal so many times, but it was all like gluing together this stuff. And I can only imagine how it would have benefited me if I had this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it is so challenging if your focus is on developer platforms and creating a good developer experience, doing this automation. The success is really adoption. That is what it depends on, because it needs to be easy to use. People need to understand what they're doing. They do not want to learn a lot of new stuff or switch context all the time. So this basically addresses all those things. So I'm I'm really impressed. And if you ask, where is this going? I expect a lot more plugins. I think that every time I talk to a company who adopted Backstage, there's always something in the works somewhere. There's also a growing interest in certain plugins. If you look at maybe stuff like supporting various tooling, or maybe even infrastructure at some point, there's a lot of interest there. So I see that growing as well. And I don't want to predict anything, but this is already a huge thing. And if you look at the adopters, like 70 plus companies, there's also a lot of really, really, really large companies who are not on the list because they don't do that. So yeah, that's like really it's really energizing to see what happens there and see all the contributions trickling in. The future is in the hands of the persons who use this. You know.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm out of questions, Jorrit. I don't know if you have any left.
No, it was a really clear story.
Yeah.
To me. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm happy I was able to continue because my screen went dark suddenly.
Yeah.
I was like, what happened here? Stress level. I did not miss the remote session.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think we saw it during the session, so that was good. Yeah.
Otherwise, cut out the FaceTime.
Yeah.
What?
Okay,
So
well,
thank you so
thank
much
you very much
for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. And we'll see you around.